Okay, a little bit, that's enough. I'll start immediately because I had to reduce 260 slides into 8 or 10 slides because I don't have so much time to see what did we find after a decade of researching and developing immersive media, which started as VR, AR, or XR, and whatever R you want to put in there, it's all good. But the big question, of course, is what is now the added value? Why would we do that? So we always look at it from a perspective of not what does the VR or XR or AR do, but what does it do in addition to the other media? And that is the big question that we have. And what we always see when we start, it's like, you know, what is it going to replace? And every speech I give, I always start with the question, it will not. And I have a question for you. Tell me which medium has disappeared in the past 200 years? Do you know one? Somebody? The fax, it's still there. You can still put a lot of faxes. Fax machines are made, and there's a fax app even if you want. One more. Telex? Maybe we have one. Maybe there's one medium after 200 years. So the question is not like what does it replace, but what is it going to do and how does it add value? And in that process, we have a very difficult thing when something new happens, which McLuhan already said. We have like what we call the achteruitkijkspiegel. That's an interesting word. The rear view mirror image, that we don't know how to create this stuff. So what we use is we use our knowledge from media that we already know. So if I talk to a movie maker, he's going to make VR, AR like a movie. A game person will make it as a game because that's what we know. But it's not, we also know it's not okay. We did the same mistake over and over again. When we have our websites, we put our website on our smartphones. It's not a smartphone, by the way, but looks like a smartphone. And then they say, like, it's not the same, you know? We have to do something else. We can't just put our folders on there and then say, like, oh, it's the same, or the website's the same. We have to change. And so in the process of researching what is the added value, we also need to learn how to develop and how to make it. Now, what have we learned so far? Like, what is the added value? It's the experience. That's why we call it now immersive media. We could all call it experience media. It is the added value of creating an experience which you normally can't have in other media, where your body reacts actually like this because it feels so real. And so we need people to understand, like, what is the experience that you want to communicate? So we need people that are able to formulate the experience. That's a new job, almost. Like, what is the experience you want to make? People from maybe branding know how to describe an experience. But we now also need it for media. And that experience, what we now know from all the projects that we've done, and we've done projects in health, in retail, in culture, in entertainment, you mentioned it. We saw that the experience is being created by the 5 Ps. So there's perspective, there's proximity, there's point of view, there's place. And I'm not going to explain them to all of you, but you can see that your whole body has to move in those different angles of a perspective. And I always give that example because we all were in school at one point in our lives. Do you remember that teacher that was leaning over you like this and saying, like, what are you doing? You had that, that feeling like, who is he and what is he doing over there? That's perspective, that's proximity, that's a different point of view. That makes the project work. And that's also where we see in a lot of projects like this, where we have trainings for fear of spiders or fear of heights, that it works so well. Because you really have to look into perspectives, point of views, and proximities that looks and feels real. That's why these really work. And all these kinds of training, where it's fear of heights, or fear of spiders, or fear of places, or fear of people. And that's what we're doing. The other thing that we really know is that we behave differently because we're being placed in a different context. And I always use this example as well. What do you see over here in the A? You see A? I only have 4 minutes left. Triangle, thank you. What do you see here? A triangle, right? But if I place you in the context and I would ask you, what do you see over here? You would say A? No, a Y triangle, of course. Thank you for that answer. Because you're in the context. So because you're in context, you see things differently and you behave differently. That's also what VR does. That's why it's such a good and strong media. That's what we've started doing. This is just one of the examples of the projects that we do, also subsidized by ClickNL in different ways. Recovery is to help people with an alcohol addiction to become back in the society again and be part of the society, to go to places where they normally don't dare to go anymore because for the fear of drinking. So they have to go to a bar. They have to go back at home where they're lonely or where there's fights. They don't dare to. They have to go back to a pub. They don't dare to. And so they need to be trained. Well, If that is really difficult to train them in these situations, in these contexts, then why not bring the context to them? And that's what we actually did. So we started to make VR projects where the people could train to deal and cope with these different situations, to not drink, but still feel that craving. So we brought all those environments to them so that they can train in a very safe environment without having to go to them, but in the end being able to go there. And then we get another problem, is like, but how real should we make these things? How real do they feel? And now, because of this whole immersive media, we have a total different concept of what is actually real, what makes us feel something as real. How real are you in VR? How are you going to represent yourself? So in this project, for example, we are looking for all kinds of different ways in what does feel real and how do we create real. So in this case, for instance, we're looking at 360 worlds created in recording VR compared to what we call CG, computer generated. 360 could be more real. It's easier to make, but it's not as flexible as CG, where I can change everything. And the same goes if we put in avatars. We can make them very real and very lifelike, or we can make them very low level. Low level has the advantage I can change a lot, I can put a lot of in there, I can easily and relatively cheap, put different people in there with different gestures, but they don't feel real. So what does that do for you? Do we need to make them more real? So we started doing these projects where we, for the first time, also put in very CG-like low-level avatars in 360 worlds for the first time, I think, in the world. This has never been done in a context like this, to see what kind of craving does it. Does it work for the training, yes or no? Do people accept that, yes or no? But the second level, of course, is what we have to do, is to create it more realistic. And one of the projects that is being done over here, also in the FNR, together with 4DR Studios and Chronosphere, it's a very big project, is to learn to understand one of those ways to create really, really real people by using volumetric captured video. That means that you can really capture people in a green screen, and then once you have them captured, they're becoming, these CG people that you can use and place everywhere you want, in an AR environment, in a VR environment. You can make them giant, you can make them small, and they look much more real, or realer. I don't know which is the right word. They look realer. But do we need that? And what makes them real? Is it the movements? Is it the look and feel? Is it the personality? Is it the data behind it? So now we're trying to figure out what happens if we put real people in there. And then we can transport them everywhere in every context that we want in AR. So we're now starting to see for the first time also how does alcohol addiction therapy in VR works in AR. And what we know, sadly maybe, but this is good, the moment you come home and you have a lot of fights with your spouse or your parents, we're doing all kinds of tests like how many emotions do we capture from these avatars. Sadly, we only capture around 40% on average of the emotions that we see. So next time you're in a fight, just remember that person only saw 40% of your emotions. So you're okay. We also see that more avatars and more realistic creates indeed more empathy. We also know that congruence is key. You can't say like, oh, we're going to make that very realistic and the other thing not, then it breaks the whole thing. We also know that if the experience is already super high, like in this fear of spiders or fear of heights, you don't need that realistic people because the experience is already really high. And we also know from a lot of research that when it comes to impulse behavior, and this is normally where I would throw this thing at you, and then you would catch it, and then you would act very normally, and you have no idea how realistic that smartphone would look. So that's what we know. But that's the next step that we need to know now. Do together with all of you, what is real? How real would you be? How would you make yourself in VR? What kind of personality? What kind of looks? And what is the effect on our behavior, our natural behavior in VR, as well in real life? And I hope we can do that all together. See you soon.
Thank you so much. Marnix van Gisbergen, thank you so much. I thought you were actually really going to throw that at me.
Yeah, so I was really planning to do that, but yes. I was like, what is if you don't catch?
Next time.
Yeah, okay.
Let's do it, yeah. It reminds me of training I've had for first aid courses where I had to go online and I had to do lots of theory, and then you go into the real life practice. Yeah. And then I had to do some online sort of virtual situations which were very unrealistic, which made me sort of almost doubt my response and what I would do, because I was so sort of distracted by what does it look like, where am I? So I totally related to when it's real, you can much easier, I think, find yourself in a situation that will connect you to what would be in real life. Yes.
Yeah.
So do you also find this with, for instance, the recovery project? Is this already
Yeah,
being
or like
done?
if you
with
can
lots of
see in
people?
the previous slide, it's one of those Chronosphere projects as well, where we do together with Schola Medica created the first training in real life for emergency training, where
Yeah.
you have to go through a protocol, the general practitioners, for instance, and they have to train it now in a real context. And we compared that, like, okay, what is it if you compare it with real life actors or with 360?
Yeah.
And you can see that that context really matters. And for instance, they can train with distraction. So now they have to have an emergency, and we have all kinds of distractions. Could be a dog that's biting you, could be like, a very annoying family member who is stressed.
Yeah.
And then you can see that in VR, they really have to turn around and have to make choices that you can't learn from traditional media.
Yeah.
Because of the context.
Has it already been used widely, the recovery?
The recovery is being used right now, yeah.
Yes.
So we've done like for 4 or 5 years now studies, and we see that it's very difficult because on the one hand it needs to produce craving, right? So we have to see like these worlds and also the different worlds like the 360 and the CG, do they create craving? And we saw yes.
Yeah.
We also saw, of course, because it's alcoholic people or having an alcoholic, don't they get nauseous and sick and that they puke all over you because it's all that also didn't happen. And we could actually see that after so many times we could reduce the number of trainings because they were more confident and they felt more secure to go back into those worlds and into the real life, becoming patient to person again.
Yeah, amazing.
Now we're looking for the long-term effects of relapse. So does it also help to prevent relapse?
In the long term, yeah.
In the long term.
I'm amazed that it would actually indeed create cravings as well.
It really does,
So that's how real it is. That's amazing. I've got many questions. I'm sure you do too. When you have one, wave at me. If it's your turn, you can walk up your walk of fame to the microphone. Introduce yourself and ask away. Can I see a show of hands, please? You have been so clear. I don't believe it. You sure? Oh, there's one right here. You can just come up here if you want to. Thank you so much.
Speakers who want more time.
Very good. We're happy with questions.
Yeah, so you said you are researching the impact that your project has. Then I take it you work together with research group, with scientists to measure the effects over longer time. Is that something that came after, or is that something that the scientists are also part of from the beginning? Like, look, we need you to design it in this way for us to effectively measure it afterwards?
Yeah, it's a super interesting and very good question. Yeah, we don't believe in this order, and again, from doing a develop something, research, develop. It's really intertwined. So at Breda University, we have our own R&D team. It's a cradle team where it's a mixture of developers, artists, programmers, and designers who work together with the researchers from the start. So it's not like, it's not even like we need this and then we do. It's even like in the development, they constantly need to talk and go back and forth, like, okay, what do we need? And of course, we have then the advantage that we can say, we want to do an experiment, so can you indeed make one avatar like this and another avatar like that, so a different world. But it's very intertwined, and we need, of course, also the field and the industry, because they're the specialist in for instance, what makes craving, or what is that actually, how do we measure that? So it's always a combination of all of them from the start.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. A huge round of applause for Marnix van Gisbergen.
Thank you.
Thank you.